Hello there, Lunar Squadron, welcome back to the channel, and welcome to another Star Wars Outlaws video. Today, we have some very exciting news for you, all out of gamesradar, where they sat down with Star Wars Outlaws creative director Julian Garrity and game director Matthias Carlson, and they talked about a lot of interesting things, from updates that they're working on to the game, to DLC, and they even touch on sequel potential, so there's a lot of exciting stuff here. We want to get right into it, but first, if you're new to the channel, we would love to have you, and the way to do that is go down below this video, click the little subscribe button, and make sure to hit the bell notification button right on next to it. It's going to let you know every single time we upload the latest and greatest Star Wars Outlaws videos here on YouTube, and to keep the conversation going on Twitter, follow us at Lunar Squadron. That said, Nick, ready to get into this one?
Oh, definitely.
All right, let's get into this. Today's article is titled, "They're Going to Have to Kick Us Out the Door. Ubisoft Massive promises that changes are coming to Star Wars Outlaws as its directors reflect on launch and look to the future." Nick, this one is a long article, so we're going to boil it down to stuff that we're excited about, stuff that we think is a bit spicy.
Yes, definitely. There is a lot of fluff in this article, so we've sat down and compiled a document of the paragraphs that we feel are the most pertinent to this conversation. And where I would like to start is where it says, "There may be nothing else quite like Outlaws out there, but that doesn't mean that Massive is moving on from its Star Wars adventure just yet. As disappointed as Garrity is with critical reception, he also understands that there's room for improvement. Quote, I think Outlaws has such long legs that this will be a game that millions of people are going to play for years and years, and we're never going to stop improving it. Well, okay, that's a lie. We'll probably stop improving it eventually," he laughs, adding, "But today my mind is not on stopping." Andreas, it's nice to hear that Massive and the team are dedicated to getting Outlaws right eventually down the road. They're always going to be well, they're not always going to be working on it, but for the foreseeable future, they are going to be working on updates to improve the user experience, and we get a lot of that same type of feeling out of the rest of the quotes in this article.
Yeah, I mean, it's really good to see that at first that Julian Garrity is a little disappointed with the critical reception, which I think is interesting because by all metrics, I think on Metacritic, I think this game did a little higher than I was expecting based on how the game was actually performing performance-wise on PS5 at least. On Metacritic, it is running at a 77 on PC, 76 on PS5, and a 75 on Xbox. So those are all, by Metascore, considered generally favorable. And it just shows the high standards that Garrity and the team had for this game. And it's good to see that they are trying to continue working on it to get it to those high standards. And I think there are some blatant things that they need to address up front, like, for me, AI. I think AI is a big one that I hope they really hit on. And they kind of do start to touch on some things that they are specifically targeting later on in this article.
Yes, they do. This next paragraph actually addresses that alongside when we can expect some of these updates and improvements to start hitting consoles and PCs around the world. This paragraph says, Massive will soon turn its attention to the development of 2 story expansions, Wildcard and Pirate's Fortune, although the studio is prioritizing improvements to the baseline game. With Garrity and Carlson, I discussed a key point of friction raised in my Outlaws review concerning some difficulty spikes and fail states across the critical path. Quote, one of the things we can see through data is that elements aren't working as well as we would like them to, says Garrity. One of the earliest missions in Miragana is incredibly punishing, and for me, that is a mistake, and it's something that we're going to work on improving. The next paragraph continues with, this doesn't necessarily mean that Massive is going to begin removing fail state conditions from Outlaws missions, like infiltrating Gorak's base at the Pike Syndicate stronghold in Miragana, but the studio is assessing different ways to make these sorts of encounters, quote, more enjoyable and understandable in the weeks ahead. Quote, with the faction district that you're going through in that mission, there is this sort of tension that we want to create, but we don't want it to feel unfair. And today, I think it feels unfair, and believe it or not, that was not our intention. This is something that crept in the last week or so, and it's something that we're correcting already for a patch that's coming out in maybe the next 10 days. So, Andreas, we learned a lot of interesting stuff in this. It looks like Massive realizes that there are some elements and components within the gameplay loop of Star Wars Outlaws that they feel will be frustrating for players, and it sounds like they are dedicated to just making the game more fun for everybody, improving and getting rid of some of the frustrations that people are feeling. And I think that's one thing that we experienced throughout our time playing the game. There are a lot of punishing moments in this game, and there's a lot of punishing like checkpoint moments where you can lose a lot of progress at one of these fail state moments. So it's nice to see that Massive is actually looking to address this situation, and we learn that one of these patches should be coming within the next week and a half or so.
Yeah, and again, I do think this is a little vague with how they're describing exactly what they are addressing here. They are talking about the fail states and how certain areas feel more punishing than others. For me, what's a little more important than those fail states, I do think it's important to update, like you were talking about, Nick, the checkpoints and how they can be very unforgiving when you do hit a fail state. But for me, what's even of more vital importance is how stormtroopers can sense you, like the consistency of the AI in stealth sequences, because that is what triggers those fail states inconsistently, and for me, that's what felt unfair. It's not necessarily that it was pushing me back a million miles, which of course I didn't like that. It's more so that the game was not behaving consistently in stealth sequences, and I think if they don't address that first bit, then I think this is kind of like a lesser evil than the trigger that is the initial problem that I have with the stealth sequences.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I definitely think that the AI and, of course, the performance and graphics, like all of that stuff is something that definitely needs work, and I think that's something we mostly can all agree on. And I'm hoping that with this patch coming in the next 10 days or so, and they know they need to address some of these issues, that is some stuff that we will start to see in those patches. Of course, we will not know that for sure until we get the patch notes and actually get to see the changes they make to the game, but it is nice to see that Massive is aware of issues with their game, and they are dedicating themselves to addressing those issues. So that's just a good first step, and we hope that this continues over the next weeks and months. And speaking of the future, we also get more information about the upcoming DLC, a lot of really interesting and fun context about the upcoming story DLC expansions. This paragraph starts with, looking to the future of the Star Wars Outlaws world, Garrity says, quote, "I'm feeling pretty good about it. Getting either Garrity or Carlson to comment beyond that on the potential for a sequel is more challenging than making the Kessel run in less than 12 parsecs, especially because the pair still have plenty of work to complete. Quote, I'm still working on it. Mateus is still working on it. We're pushing a lot of improvements, says Garrity. Not just on the base game, but it's things that we're going to deliver later this year and next with the downloadable episodes we're creating. They are heavily themed, pushing a certain aspect of the game that we have even further. So, Andreas, I found the end of this quote very interesting, where they're talking about how the upcoming story expansion DLC for Star Wars Outlaws is going to focus in on a certain component of the gameplay loop and look to expand that and take it a step further and just make it more involved. I think that's a really interesting way to approach story DLC for a game like Star Wars Outlaws.
I do think that it's really interesting here that it at least looks like the interviewer asked Garrity and Carlson point blank if there is a potential for a sequel here, and they immediately switched gears to what they are working on with the game right now. And it's natural to expect that sort of a PR response when I think it's probably a little uncertain on their end if there will be a sequel or not. And of course, the leading figure on whether there will be a sequel or not is how much money this game is making, how many copies are they selling. When you have a game like Hogwarts Legacy, we saw a statement come out this week out of WB Games that they are of course working on a sequel for that game because it sold so freaking well that it wouldn't make any sense if they didn't make a sequel for that game. Nick, what do you think? Are we going to see a sequel for Star Wars Outlaws? Like, obviously we don't have a crystal ball here, but what do you personally think based on all of the factors, based on your playthrough of the game, your general vibes? Like, we've been talking about Star Wars games for a while, so like, what do you think about it?
I will say that I hope this game gets a sequel just because I really love the characters and the character moments of this game, and I would like to see their stories continue in some sort of way. But the other side of me, just, I'm not sure, just because, like you said, we just don't know the metrics of how this game is performing in terms of sales and stuff like that. And I just don't know with, licensing the Star Wars IP and how expensive that is. And I just feel like the general vibes we got from the Massive team throughout this entire process, it almost felt like they were treating this as like their one shot at this, kind of a one-off, even though the story itself kind of lends itself to be a potential franchise opportunity. I'm not sure. My heart says, yeah, please give it to us, but my brain is just like not ready to jump off the deep end there and be like, yeah, we're going to get a sequel. I really am just not sure. Honestly, I'd probably lean more towards no right now.
Yeah, I honestly agree with you, Nick. I think especially like this article touches on that Julian Garrity is already kind of moving on to the next thing with the Division 3. So it does seem like this team is not diving straight into a sequel at this point. They are going to be working on their regularly scheduled programming that Massive has been working on, which is the Division games. So that makes perfect sense given the context of the gaming industry right now. I mean, we've seen companies such as Electronic Arts really struggle to justify the high pricing for licensing with Lucasfilm when it comes to Star Wars games. It is expensive to make a Star Wars game, and essentially you have to kill it on sales to justify the high licensing costs. So this game really does have to go out and murder it on the market to make it a no-brainer to make a sequel. And we know with any game, like we saw with Concord this week, games are a risk and things can backfire very fast, and it's just a whole snowball effect. So who knows in this crazy gaming industry what will happen, but one thing's for sure, we'd love to see more Star Wars games, and we'd love to see more open world Star Wars games going forward. And that brings us to our next quote here, which is one that you were very excited about, right, Nick?
Yes, definitely. I think there's no better way to close out this conversation than with this paragraph right here where it says, the first, of course, talking about the Wildcard DLC, is all about Sabacc. So we're going to build on that and make that something that has a really strong Sabacc theme. And the next, that being A Pirate's Fortune, features Hondo Ohnaka from the animated shows. He's a legendary pirate, a great character, and super humorous. That is a space piracy focused and really pushing the space aspect. We would have loved to spend more time in space in Outlaws. There's so much for us to do there. We've got such a great system. There's a great foundation. It's not as easy as it looks because everything is level design and that's a lot of work, but there's so much we can do there, says Garrity, adding, quote, I'm still working on it. Mateus is still working on it. We're pushing a lot of improvements. We just don't want to let it go. They're going to have to kick us out the door. Andres, a lot of really cool stuff here. We learned about how we knew the Lando one was going to be about like the casino and the Sabacc, but it looks like they're going to try to push the boundaries of what you can do when it comes to the Kessel Sabacc in Star Wars Outlaws. I'm really fascinated to see what they mean by that because I already feel like it's a pretty robust minigame. I don't like, are they going to add more cheats? Are they going to add more abilities for Nix? Is there going to be higher stakes to it? Like, really fascinated to learn more about that. And what has me the most excited is about this whole space pirate and how they say they have a strong foundation for their space gameplay, but they wanted to do even more, and they're looking to do more with this Hondo Ohnaka space gameplay, and I think that is incredibly exciting because I agree. I think there is a strong foundation for the space gameplay in this game, but I don't think that potential has been fully realized in the base game. So really excited to see how they're able to push the envelope with their space gameplay, and I agree with him. There is a lot more that they could do in space.
For me personally, I think that there is so much they can do with things in space, like the space stations. Like we saw, there was an entire Imperial space station that we had that in that whole stealth sequence with. I would like to see more of that, like more of areas freely floating in space stations or bigger ships or capital ships. That's what I kind of want to see because for me personally on the sticks, I'm not in love with flying around the Trailblazer personally. I know I'm not everyone's opinion, but that's just where I stand, and I'd love to see more places in space in general, because I thought that there could have been more of that, and where it did occur in the game, I liked it, so I'd love to see more of it with this part of the DLC.
Yep, completely agree. I think space gameplay and space pirate, that just sounds like it could be a lot of fun. Can't wait to see what they do with that. Anyway, guys, let us know your thoughts down below on all of this new information. How do you feel about the patch that apparently is coming within the next week and a half? What would you like to see addressed? Do you think that Star Wars Outlaws should or will get a sequel? We'd love to hear what you guys think about that. And what do you think about the upcoming story DLCs, where one is going to be heavily focused on the gameplay mechanics of Sabacc and the other one is all about space gameplay apparently? Just let us know all your thoughts about all of this new information that we learned today. Anyway, guys, that is going to do it for us for this one. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, we will see you all next time.